the EDA meeting for the city of Lake Elmo, November 19th to order. I don't have my agenda pulled up, so you'll have to excuse me.
Would you like a copy? See
So
my
the-
copy?
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the first thing on the agenda is approval of the August 20th, 2024 minutes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to, oh, there's my mail. Approve the minutes from the August 20th, 2024 minutes. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right. First thing on the agenda is to discuss the RFP for the old fire station and public works building. Review of the draft RFP for discussion, and Director Stopa will walk us through that.
Okay, so what we have today is a draft of the RFP. Look to approve it and amend it, and then move it on to the city council. So just so we're aware of the property, these are all the tax parcels. It's about 1.2 acres, but it's really about 0.8 that's buildable. We will be looking for right-of-way dedication and the proposer to tell how they would want to potentially combine all the lots or have separate lots. So the background on this is, as we know, the Old Village visioning study asked residents what they thought would be best at this location. And what they said were eating and drinking establishments, family-friendly spaces, some housing, maybe mixed-use, community center, green spaces, recreational spaces, and retail. Really just a place that's activated where residents can go and meet was what I was hearing. The survey results indicated that residents did not want a big box development or something kind of large out of scale, and that they wanted to preserve the charm and character of the old village. So we're talking about kind of going through the RFP in the sections. So one is the purchase price, and then also discussion of environmental came up in the past. So one thing that we want to do is we want to order an appraisal so we can get the value of the property before issuing the RFP. We discussed the minimum purchase price of $100,000, and then we're looking at if someone comes in with a purchase under the appraisal price, it's considered potentially a business subsidy, and we're working with legal and Sarah on how we would go about that if we were to provide a subsidy. We can provide $150,000, above before it is considered a subsidy. Also, while the purchase price is not a primary factor in the decision, the city may consider the offer amount when selecting a proposal. So what we're saying and what you'll see later in the presentation is we're not going to assign a point value necessarily to the purchase price, but that could be considered when looking at different proposals. The phase one is something that we're recommending that we also do prior to releasing the RFP. This will just tell us whether or not we would need a phase two and potential cleanup. We do know as a fire station, and I believe in the packet it was like a building assessment, multiple buildings. Well, this building was assessed, and there was concern in that review of potential contamination.
Everybody know what a phase one environmental assessment is?
No.
If you could just
So-
speak to that.
Yeah, so basically the phase one environmental is we would hire a firm and they would look at the use of the building, the history of the building. It would not be soil samples and that sort of thing. And then it would basically recommend, based on previous use, whether we should go in order of phase two. And the phase two would then look at the contamination and then present us with a cost to clean up the site and potentially, how we should go about cleaning up the site.
So how does that differ from the 2017 inspection that was?
I
loaded in?
believe that was just noting that this was a fire station. If you read it, it said, firefighters have a higher rate of cancer dealing, with asbestos and whatever those risk factors are. So there is concern that it is contaminated. I think it's in the best interest of the city to get the phase one, only because if we don't, the potential buyer will get one, most likely with their financing. And then we're kind of trying to renegotiate this because we don't really know what we're dealing with at that point. I mean, we could hold off on a phase one and have them go through that process and maybe not sign a purchase agreement. But I think we have enough time to kind of start that process and understand if we really need to remediate and get a cost factor on the remediation. We think the estimate is around 3,000 to 5,000 on a phase one.
Yeah, I think it's a prudent thing to do.
Is that?
I think it's the prudent thing to do.
Okay.
Yeah, I would think so.
I read the assessment from 2017, not word for word, but I looked through it. Didn't see anything about firefighting foam. Is there any knowledge that firefighting foam was stored or used there?
I would have to talk to Dustin, I believe so, but I'm not sure.
Because there would be an issue with this PFAS situation. If somebody had spilled a bunch of firefighting foam, that might be a serious issue to be concerned about cleaning up.
So I talked to him today to see if he has any other background or history on the site, any type of environmental reports. So what we're thinking about is a committee, and basically it's all EDA members who want to be on the committee, one planning commissioner and city staff, a maximum of 10 representatives. They would score the proposals individually, and at least three, they would select at least 3 of the highest to be finalists. And then the finalists will come to an EDA meeting and present to the committee. And it's an open meeting, and the committee can ask questions of the proposals, the people submitting proposals. And then the idea is we would take that as a committee, and the committee would send their recommendation to council. After that, staff would negotiate a purchase agreement. So our timeline is a little aggressive. Factoring in the environmental assessment may push us back a little bit, but the idea is that we would issue the proposals. We would have a building open house, so we would invite anyone who wants to see the fire station could walk through the fire station. We'd also make the fire station available to people that were interested. We'd have a pre-application conference that would be myself walking through what's required to submit, and that's when applicants can ask questions. We do all this, we track all the questions, so we set a date when they're due, and then we'll issue an addendum answering every question. So we'll list all the questions that are asked, all the answers. These are typically something that could modify the proposal. And then in April, the proposals would be due. And then after that, it would just be the dates would fall in line with reviewing the proposals, making the 3 recommendations, and then having them present to the EDA in the special meeting and then going to council. So the evaluation criteria is broken into community benefits, economic benefits, and then, let me see what the last one is. It's the developer qualifications. So the idea here is, what we heard is land use is very important. It seems like that is the driver. We want to make sure if we're going through this RFP process, we have people that are promoting what we've heard residents want in the survey. So we have examples would include retail, restaurants, bakeries, tap rooms, brew pubs, markets, et cetera. Some mixed-use developments if they're on the 2nd floor. But buildings should not exceed 2 stories. I think that goes back to the charm in creating a small site as opposed to like a large 4-story mixed-use building. Preservation and design. This would encourage the retention of the fire station and not demolition of the fire station. I think that's important. From what I've heard through the survey, I think the Parks building and Public Works building, based on what we heard, could be demolished, so we want to hear from people what they plan to do with that building.
So Jason, I don't know if now's the time to ask, but I was really surprised to see that the encouragement of the preservation of the fire station. It's not, it doesn't, it's not like it's classic architecture, it strikes me that using that building might hinder development options rather than promote them or promote any benefit to the city, which is where this is, benefits to the city. Mm-hmm. So where did the preservation of the fire department building actually come from surveys? Is that where it came from?
I believe overall it's preservation of the district, and just discussing it, it seems like the fire station is something that people want to save. This is something we can modify if other members don't think that's important. It does seem like I've talked to people who are interested, they like the building because it has high ceilings, it's open, has large roll-up doors. It can be
It's one
an
story.
adaptive reuse fairly easily, so.
It's a single story and considering two-story development, right? Just, plus the 2017 inspection seemed to uncover a variety of hazardous materials present on the site, right?
I think that's why we're recommending in phase one, to get an understanding of what is there. And from reading that 2017 study, it sounds like a lot of the issues are fairly minor and can be repaired. I think it's important to understand how much contamination is on site. I would assume though also if a demolition would occur, that would be a demolition, potential cleanup. I mean, you may have to haul out soils and replace soils, and it's gonna be interesting to see what the environmental comes back. But I think that preservation of the fire station is something that, in keeping with the charm and kind of neighborhood, it's kind of like a small business corridor, it seems to make sense as opposed to like a larger, brand-new mixed-use building in that area. I think you're gonna see some of that in the eastern part that is undeveloped, where it's high density. You're gonna see 3-4 story buildings in that area. And so I don't know if that's something you would wanna see promote as demolition of the entire site and someone come in with a mixed-use building. Also, mixed-use buildings are difficult to build, so you could have a situation where somebody is coming in and just wants to build apartments there. I don't know if that's also something that.
I see it as, it's encouraged. Developer's not gonna lose points if they do propose to demolish it, so maybe something will spark and maybe it won't, maybe they'll all do the same, or, I don't know that it's a bad thing if you keep it that way, but it's not necessarily a bad thing if somebody comes in with a great idea either. I personally don't have a problem with it.
It depends
So
on-
when it comes to the criteria, because I do a lot of grant evals at work, and we'll have differences in how we score things, right? I mean, 20 points there's many options here. Will there be an additional rubric within within these 20 points, or is it can be pretty much then, you know what, I think it's an 18.5 and another person thinks it's 10, but it's really because of one variable. How much alignment do we want our reviewers to have?
I think you're gonna have on something like this, it's an all or nothing. It's basically, do you wanna preserve the fire station? That's the way it's written, so if you can figure out a way to preserve it, you get the 20 points. One thing to consider, if it's not important, then reducing that, and then maybe adding it to land use if you wanna reduce it from 20 to 10, and then add those points to the land use, since land use seems to be the most important. That would be something to consider.
I don't think that a redistribution of points would be a bad thing necessarily, and maybe, I like the community benefits being high. But yeah, you could distribute that into maybe public space and streetscape improvements and parking, I don't know. Do 10, 10, and, or 10, and, I don't know. Just, I don't think that can be malleable as far as I'm concerned, but I'm only one on the E EDA.
One other question, is there a possibility that someone would want to bid on only one part, like the fire station or the public works? Would that be allowed, or is it just a parcel, just one thing?
I think we would allow that depending on the application. So I think ideally you'd want someone who would buy the entire site, and if they have development partners, want to work through that process. But if someone just says, I want this one site, and we don't have, I think we would consider the other ones first. Don't think that would disqualify them.
Okay, thank you.
Would we want that as part of the evaluation criteria? That they get higher points if they're bidding for the entire,
Okay.
it could be, it might be 5 points. It's in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
If that's the preference, but it's not a must-have, someone could have a awesome proposal that doesn't include that and they have the other 95.
Right, you have to leave enough flexibility for innovative ideas to come in.
Yeah.
Since we're talking about points, is it possible that having a list saying, here's how we're gonna score these, could come back and bite us if some proposer would say, hey, wait a minute, you're not scoring me fairly, and are we accountable to the people submitting the proposals for the quality of how we assign points from one bid to the next?
So
Is
we,
that legal liability?
yes, I mean, I think we've talked to legal about this in a review, and we discussed where the flexibility would come in. This is a first round with points, so we would want to pick the top three. We've written flexibility to have more than three, and then when they would actually do the presentation, that's where there's flexibility to say, like, this was our number one choice. Or if you want to reorder, if it's a sequence of, this is the one that has the highest points, 1, 2, 3, you could then, reorder those through the interview process. So,
With regards to the appraisal, you might want to check with former interim administrator Schroeder on that. I know that at one point he and I had talked about that, and we had used an appraiser. I don't know if he moved along with that same one or not, so.
we have the name.
Yeah,
Okay.
we have the contact information.
All right.
So any thoughts on the preservation and design, if it should be reworked, if the points should be assigned?
I like the idea of the streetscape improvements, I mean, adding some level of charm and appeal to that area. The core building is obviously the most important, but
I'd propose that you put preservation design at 15 and public space and streetscape to 10. Because really, the design is gonna be in my mind, the most prominent feature, and then the surrounding area around it. But I do agree that, it'd be nice to see how they incorporate what's still there, if they can, and if they don't, they don't, but, might look great either way.
So I'll kind of talk about public space, streetscape improvements, and parking together, because one of the things that we heard from the survey is that people wanted access to parking, that the parking needs to be retained, and also people like the idea of still having public parking. So we're asking the developer if they can come up with a parking plan that allows residents to also use the site. That would be in an agreement that we would work through, and just basically be creative with that. So have enhanced landscaping in the parking lot, potentially have landscaping in front of the fire station, and submit a plan, right? So if they can come up with something creative, they'll get more points, and I think based on how creative they are, and if you like the design, if you like how they're approaching it, you could assign, all 10, 5, 2, 0, and then the streetscape improvements are going up to 10. That's gonna be important, because if they do have a large parking lot, you are gonna wanna screen it and kind of rework that entire site. Economic impact, this is just stating that the developer, the proposer should look at small business, promote that with 5 points. And then the question is, does this development attract residents to the village? Like, does it encourage more development also? So if you put something in the village and people are selling houses around the village, are they gonna say, like, I want to live near this use? Like, are we building the village to be this attraction? And then the developer qualifications, pretty straightforward. Experience and success with demonstrated projects, provide references, a basic approach timeline, basically their plan. We want to know their costs, kind of roughly, and what they think they're gonna spend.
Why
And
do
then
we need their costs?
I think it's good to understand how ambitious they are.
Okay,
I don't think we need a ballpark, and we want to know, like, their proof of funds related to, like, their overall cost, so
Okay.
that they have the ability to finish the project.
all right.
You can also see this 25 points, so it's pretty small compared to the first category.
Well, I agree on the experience and success, and I agree on the proof of funds. And I guess the other one's just 5 points, so, timeline's important. Whether they're gonna spend, as long as they have the finance put together what they're proposing. I don't know, there's just, that's fine if it's there.
Do we anticipate that the proposal is going to be, how do I say this? I can picture a developer saying, hey, we've got these multiple spaces and we're hoping to get this kind of business here, and we're hoping to get that kind of business there, when in fact, I think from my standpoint, the benefits, and from the community standpoint, the interest to come downtown is going to be exactly which businesses come in to fill those spots. Are we likely to be approving a proposal before we know that information? I think we are, aren't we?
I don't know that we wanna encompass what I think you're referring to as a speculative, site versus a build to, suit a particular business site.
So you're thinking that we will have knowledge of building for a specific business?
I would be preferred by me.
Yeah, well, and that was my point, but I just think of developer and, is he gonna have a specific restaurant, identified, or a brew pub identified? I would hope so, because that would, in my mind, really control the value of the development.
Well, that's certainly something you can score on.
Yes, yeah.
And I do think when we negotiate the purchase agreement and move forward, we will want to see business categories, and I can talk about it later. In the RFP, you'll see approved businesses and how we would approach that. So this is important, is the post-closing performance measures. So the first part is basically from being awarded, selling the property prior to substantial completion. So we talked to legal about a reverter or clawback period. It's, some of the compliance goals would be a building permit shall be received within 1 year of closing on the property. And then 90 days after the 1 year period, the city may initiate the return of the property minus purchase price and closing costs. What we're trying to do here is outline, and the way we're gonna write the RFP is protect the city and flexibility as we move forward. So it's not like this is exactly what we wanna do. But this idea of that we could take the property back if someone doesn't get building permits, and kind of spell out expectations to the proposer so they understand moving forward. Number two, the property shall be substantially completed within 1 year of receiving a building permit. And then also the 90 days after the 1 year period, the city may initiate the return of the property. We're looking at, we would pay purchase price, closing costs, and then any increased value of the improvements based on an updated appraisal from our appraiser. So it kind of protects the developer who's coming in. We're not looking to revert the property or take it back. We do want you to meet these goals and deadlines. And with the purchase agreement, we'd probably write additional, if this happens, you can ask for an extension and these sorts of things. But our idea is, I would like them to be in the RFP so they understand we will have some performance measures, especially if you are receiving a subsidy and going below, if the value comes in at $500,000 and they offer 100, right?
Best to have all the rules spelled out first.
No. And then the transfer and assignment, if they come in and they have somebody that they are willing to assign it to, that's a very good developer, or something happens and we sign off on it, we have the ability to transfer it. That's always good, in my experience. Certificate of occupancy and project compliance. So this is one if they have a subsidy or don't need a subsidy. They may come in and say, I don't want a subsidy, I just want to go ahead and, pay up to the appraiser. So the subsidy needed, the idea here is that the developer may receive equity after the final certificate of occupancy is issued for the site. So if they have a certain dollar amount, that could be a goal, like you have your certificate of occupancy, you can earn equity towards that subsidy. And then after that is fulfilled, we have to look at the state statute and the dollar amounts to make sure that we are in line with that. But I'm thinking that the minimum compliance period if they're receiving a subsidy is 2 years. So when they open all their businesses and they're open for 2 years And if they have a subsidy, it's basically I've used like a soft second mortgage in the past, where they earn equity and then it falls off. Like, we're not funding the mortgage, but they gain equity over time. If they don't, then we're looking at the certificate of occupancy, and then 1 year. If they're open for 1 year, then we'll just consider the project completed and we issue a certificate of completion. So also the transfer assignment, within the compliance period, if the developer chooses to transfer the property, they may approach the city may approve a transfer to a third party. Prior to the compliance period, the city shall have the right, a first refusal to purchase the property. If the developer attempts to sell the property without city approval, the price shall be set at the appraised value minus the outstanding city subsidy. So if they have a subsidy and they go to sell it, we would have that on the title, so we could at least make that decision. That decision would be ultimately made by the city council and would be brought to the city council at a meeting. Approved businesses. So the businesses that occupy the site shall be specified in the RFP. So if they want to be speculative and but say it's going to be a restaurant and this is going to be an office, or we're going to have a mixed use with like apartments, they need to just spell that out. And if it's maybe something a little bit different, then that could be okay. They just need to tell us what that's going to look like. It's kind of like a plan unit development where they list eligible types of businesses. I think that's the easiest way to go about it. I think we could protect ourselves if we have a business that comes in and says, I'm going to put this certain business on the site. We could write the purchase agreement that says we want this business at the site. But the idea is there should be an approved business list. And all businesses shall be approved, and they should receive a certificate of zoning compliance from community development. If business opens that was not approved, the compliance period shall not begin. If the use is not removed within 90 days, the city may foreclose on the mortgage if we have one in the soft second. Or we could also initiate the reverter, looking at the purchase price. Either the reverter or going through that purchase price that we talked about earlier. If a business closes within the compliance period, a city-approved business shall open within 90 days. If not open within 90 days, the compliance period shall be extended 6 months or the length that the building is vacant, whichever is greater. If receiving a subsidy, the compliance period shall align with the state statute. So we're trying to protect the city. It's challenging to know how this could play out after. But this is something that's really going to work its way into the purchase agreement, which then there will be an agreement signed at the closing that will attach to the act of sale. So this is more of like, in general, do you think this is the right direction to go in? Does any of this seem too restrictive? Do we need to do more?
What do you guys think?
I think it's a very complex situation, and there's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts to it. It's not at all like selling a piece of private property, but I think you're doing a good job of protecting the city interests.
Do we think 1 year is enough if they're open for 1 year and then they're issued the certificate of completion?
Yeah, I think, you gotta also have the understanding that sometimes small businesses don't survive, right? So, and it's hard to measure effort. But I think I agree in protecting the city, and, we don't have a lot of real estate in the old village area, as many of you know. So to the extent that we can try and make sure that that fits what the residents are looking for and need or want, I think we should do that, so.
Yeah, if you're not in a hurry to sell it, then why not be as particular as you want to be?
I honestly don't know if that's too restrictive or not.
Part of it is not being a developer myself, right? So,
Mhm.
or a business owner per se.
It gets challenging because you're gonna have banks that are gonna want at a certain point. They're gonna have a mortgage most likely.
Yeah.
And then our soft second will be subordinate to that, so it makes it challenging. They may want a reverter clause, so it's gonna be challenging. We'd have to work with the bank and work with our legal department to make sure everybody can move forward and get the financing they need.
Sure.
But you usually with these, it's challenging because the use is really driving this. So not only is someone going to have to spend money to develop this site, but then we want to make sure it's used the way they say it's going to be used for a certain amount of time. I think that you do operate in good faith
Right.
with the developers. They're, you know, it could possibly, what we're really trying to do is set up a system where they understand what we're going to require. And I think the way you write this is protect the city and then also let the city council make decisions as they come up if someone wants to modify the agreement in the best interest possibly of the city. So this could be challenging, so that's why I think it's important to look at their history, look at their financing. I think it's important to look at the total cost to see, is it feasible? I worked with a developer one time that had, I'm gonna do 20 houses at a time and I'm gonna do this, and they were a smaller developer and they couldn't do it. I mean, it didn't work out. And then the other guys, I'll do 2 at a time. It was very easy. So I'm always concerned when people say they can do something that's 2, 3, 4, 5 times greater than they've ever done.
Done
Like,
before,
you know,
right.
do we really wanna go down that path? So,
Well, some of that would come out in the previous information requested, right? Like the history of the developer and experience and examples, right? That would
Correct.
show that they're capable, able to do that.
that's correct. I think with post-closing performance measures, it's making sure that we think of all the scenarios that we can consider to where someone can't say, oh, well, I don't want to perform and there's nothing in this document that says I have to do certain things, or they figure out a way around it. So that's kind of why I just wanted to put that out and know that they will be monitored for a certain amount of years. Any comments about I guess just 1 year sounds good, or is it when a business opens, if they say they're gonna open the tap room and the tap room is open?
I mean, I don't have an answer as to whether 1 year is right. It seems more so that because we know there are many interested parties, because we know that this is an asset, it does allow us to be a bit more protective of the city. If this was something that had no interest whatsoever, I don't think we'd be in a position where we could be this restrictive, because we'd be begging people to come in, whereas we are not in that situation. So I think that is a bit more advantageous, where we can be a bit more protective and intentional. Whether or not a year is correct, I will defer to smarter people at this table than I.
More experience.
Brandon?
Oh, man, happy to be here. Well, yeah, what are you hearing from your conversations? Is there excitement?
I've heard from about 3 or 4
Do you think we'll
people.
field a successful, business?
I think I've heard about from 3 or 4 people. I think they're positive. They're ready to see what the RFP says, right? That they're interested in that. So I think the other thing to think about is if it is a 1 year and let's say it is a restaurant, restaurants have a high turnover rate, they could always assign it to another restaurant, right? So we're not gonna start the clock over on a new restaurant, with the way it's written. So, there's a little bit of interest, and I'm hearing different things still. It's not just 5 different restaurant concepts, right?
It's good.
Well, I'd be curious, like Nina, in your case as a business owner, does that timeline seem practical from a business standpoint? Like, does it seem too cumbersome? Is it rational? I can't.
guess I don't really understand the 1 year rule. What is the 1 year?
So once you open the business, let's say someone comes in and wants whatever business that is, and it doesn't need to be a specific, it's more of a type. They would have to, that business would have to stay open for 1 year, and then they would get a certificate of completion, and then they would be out of the RFP, this entire process. So the documentation that's on the title would no longer be in effect. It
The
would
business has to survive for a year.
survive for 1 year.
And so like, they have a year to get a permit essentially, hopefully come sooner, a year to complete that permit, hopefully sooner, and then a year to survive on top, so.
Well, I think the first year goes by fast and you go in a lot of
Yeah.
debt, so you're gonna keep going after that 1 year to try and pay off your debt.
No.
But,
But this RFP is with the developer and not necessarily with the businesses, right? I mean, is the developer on the hook, to make sure things are running, a year? Or does that responsibility transfer to the business when the business moves in?
It's the developer. It's the developer. And then if there's a subsidy, the subsidy would go to the developer, and then we'd have to follow state statute until, state statute, it depends on their proposal, but it has to do with job creation and that sort of thing, and there's calculations. So we have to follow that. So if they sign up for that, they may have to be open for more than 1 year.
And that's all on the hypothetical that it's under the 100,000 minimum.
Right, they may come in and state they don't want to follow the rules for the subsidy, or they can't meet the subsidy rules, so therefore they don't want one, and then they're gonna build out and stay, whatever, business they want to put there would have to be open for 1 year. So it may be in their best interest not to ask for a subsidy too.
All right, thank you.
Are you going to get into the Exhibit 2 Village Mixed-Use thing? Because I'm curious about the number of units and how they might be mixed up. I've got .8 acres with a VMX density of 5 to 10 units per acre, which would suggest we're going to have 4 to 8 units in this development for somebody who buys the entire .8 acre, right? Am I interpreting that correctly? And if I am interpreting it, I think the VMX says it could be all residential, it could be all commercial, or some mix, right?
That's correct, I believe it's 80%.
Oh, okay, and what I was gonna suggest is, can we make sure that we've got, you know, a minimum number of commercial, you know, and not,
Yeah.
we really don't want all residential in there, I don't think. I think we're looking for a business climate.
Right,
We
that-
want to have at least half, I would think, of those 4 to 8 units be commercial, in my opinion.
So the purpose of the chart was just to show people the use chart, so they understand when they propose businesses, what's permitted, what's conditional. They would still have to go through a conditional use process if that was awarded, but during the proposal and during the selection that the committee is gonna go through, if the committee says we don't want, you know, we wanna limit the amount of residential, then that's possible. Like you would do that during the selection of the proposal at that point. The intent of having that chart was just to show people what they could
Yeah.
put there.
But if we're going to, do we need to be clear for the developer who's making the proposal that, you know, we need to have commercial there? I mean, if we don't, they're gonna get a lot less points if they don't have a fair amount of commercial in there.
What
Don't they
we'll
need to
do-
know that?
That's a good point. What we'll do, in the section, we'll add a land use section just to walk them through land use requirements. And then that chart can just be an exhibit of what's used.
Okay.
So we'll add a land use section.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments? If not, we have a motion to recommend approval of the RFP for the old fire station to the city council as presented by staff with all the changes that we discussed.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to recommend approval of the RP at the old fire station at city council as presented by staff. Discussion.
How would this be made public? How does it get, to whom, is this sent out? Is it just posted on a website? How do potential developers know about this?
We are going to create a marketing plan and draft that up. So it will be on the website. We definitely probably want to post the station on site, have signs on the site, and also continue to work with our new communications staff person that's coming on, to work with them on just, if there's anything more. We'll probably want to do social media and other ways to get the word out.
Is there a way to work with the St. Croix Valley Chamber or the Stillwater Area Chamber of Commerce? They can probably post something out there, you know, they've got a lot of business ties. Something in that realm. The real thing is just to get it, I think we did something on the 180 acres and we got feedback that there were a lot of developers that didn't even know we were trying to do something there and they missed it. So I think the last thing we want to hear from people is that I never knew it was out.
And maybe signage on some of the main roads, if it's possible, instead of just the fire station itself.
I think that's a good point. If people drive by, they should see a big sign for sale.
So is,
If you don't make the turn by there, you know, your cars are driving by or something. I don't know how big of a sign you need, but some way to make it known.
Yeah.
is the ideal buyer someone who's gonna come in, develop it, and then rent it to another business? Or someone who's gonna buy it, develop, and be owner occupied?
From the people that I've spoken to, it sounds like they want to owner occupy,
Oh, really?
from just the few people that I've spoken to. I think a developer, if they were to buy it and lease it, would maybe build on a greater scale, maybe a larger scale development.
I think it's interesting. It's a pretty rare opportunity, right? Like, to have a building where that is, that's city-owned, like, it's not private hands, it's,
Well, it's for sale, do you want it?
if I had my deeper pockets, but daycare for my twins robs my bank account. I've got lots of crazy ideas.
I think it's a good opportunity. I appreciate staff putting this all together, but it's also good to get this feedback from members of the public on the EDA. So I don't try to talk as much on here because I want to hear the feedback from our 4 community members, because we sit on council, so we'll have feedback as it is. But I do think this is a very good process, and I think it is worth moving forward on. I think the community will be in favor of it. And it's good to go on from my side.
All right, so I'm gonna call the question. All those in favor of the motion to recommend the approval of the RFP for the old fire station to city council as presented by staff and with changes entertained during the meeting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion is passed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Stopa.
When do you put together the committee, identify committee members?
It will be pretty soon. I mean, we'll send an email to make sure everybody here wants to be on the committee. If you don't want to be on the committee, that's fine. We're gonna have to get the planning commission to choose a member, and
You-
then,
I would like to be
You
on.
can't develop it if you're on the committee, Don.
Oh, darn.
That's called a conflict of interest, Don. Yeah, well, so we'll get that out and then people get back with Director Stopa. Moving along to item 4, we're a little behind schedule, but we want to look at the 2025 work plan.
okay, so the work plan that was sent out, we changed the format a little bit. We wanted to just talk large goals, business retention, expansion, attraction, collaboration, and partnership. We're talking to the Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Stillwater Chamber of Commerce, to see if potentially we want to do more there. Maybe an EDA member wants to attend more events and create a membership, that sort of thing. So I'm asking them for member benefits, costs, and what that would look like. Community-centered development, align development and community needs, and encourage public participation and sustainable growth. These are pretty much just goals that if something comes up, we can go back to these and say, do they align with our goals? One of the things that we did different is we really direct action items so that we have things that we want to achieve during the year, the deliverable, and when we feel like we can finish them. So with the city property planning, we have obviously a few things going on, but assist city staff and city council with marketing efforts for city-owned properties. So issue an RFP for old fire station and public works building. We're hoping to get that out in the first quarter. And then create a plan to develop the city-owned 180 acres to issue an RFP. We have talked to the Urban Land Institute, and what we're probably gonna do is bring them in first quarter meeting to go over a technical assistance panel. It's a 3-day process. It's about $35,000. What I'm thinking is, if we sell the fire station, we could potentially use some of that revenue for pre-development costs. She'll be here to pitch it, and, you can decide how you want to move forward. We also talked about commercial real estate brokers and just listing it with a broker, and paying them a percentage. So we're considering how we want to fund the study, but looking at that in second, third quarter of next year and starting that process with the 180 acres. And then hopefully by the end of the year, we can issue an RFP for the 180 acres.
Jason, forgive me my ignorance here, but I'm not familiar with where or what constitutes these 180 acres. Is it one area to be sold all at once? Is it multiple areas?
Here,
How do I?
I'll show you. I'll show it.
Okay.
And yes, it's 180 acres on the western border surrounding the public works that the city received in its individual lawsuit with 3M.
And the lots, there are lots below and above the
It's a
road.
pretty cool site. So, we're out here at 14. I'm gonna give you a.
So we're up at the Public Works Building, we're not,
Yes, sir.
we're not there,
No.
okay.
Where am
And for context, the city has tried to sell it multiple times and it has failed.
More activity going on out there, maybe the time is better.
So the
We
technical,
got a coffee shop there now, right? We got a Starbucks.
I? There's a Starbucks
I was
going.
at old gym and they closed it, the LA Fitness, I'm bitter. I should open a gym at the fire station.
All right. So,
Good try that, yeah.
Yeah.
This is the Public Works Building there?
no, right here.
Oh, okay.
So
So this is
it's-
Keats.
We're gonna
It's
we can
all
tear down, build
this
condos, so yeah, maybe
and
there's
all of
Oh, on the other side
this.
too.
attractive
Yeah.
growth
Okay.
over there.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, I got it. Thank you.
so with that, I mean, as everybody sounds like we should keep that in there. And I think Meg Flanagan as the representative would be here to discuss how a technical assistance panel works. Does that sound good in the first quarter meeting?
Who do you want to decide whether we go with ULI or with brokers? Do you want
Well,
EDA feedback on that before going to council?
We would. I think you would have to do both realistically.
Right.
Because the way the panel's set up, it's more or less a planning exercise. And then do we want to use brokers? Probably we want to use brokers on a site this large. But, yeah. Issue an RFP for the city-owned 180 acres. And then the next one is enhancing Lake Elmo's communication efforts for economic development. So participate in city efforts to improve marketing materials, continuing efforts to highlight local businesses. I think, okay, so collaborating with the new communications coordinator. I think this is gonna be the most important. We're gonna work directly with that person. Website updates, social media updates, adding more content to the fresh, everything we kind of talked about earlier this year. We're gonna work with that person to do that. And then promote resources and tools for economic development to business partners and stakeholders. If we have materials that we can create, like the sign guide that was released, anything else to help developers, we'll continue to do that. Also working with the county.
I think a little bit of that definition in the deliverable action item would be helpful.
More defined?
Yeah,
Okay.
just as you just stated, just have a little more, rather than keeping it so general. Director, so, when we're looking at plans and, as look at, SMART goals, things that can be measured, have metrics around them. Reasonable, trackable.
Okay. So I think most of our time will be spent updating communications. We should be getting a new website this year. A lot of what we couldn't do was because we were waiting on the website. So
Okay.
between that and the RFPs, I think we'll have a lot to work on. Anything else?
Any
Yes,
comments?
I'd like to ask, in the 2024 work plan, we had the objective of responding to the upcoming RFP for money from the 3M Priority 2 program. I don't see that in this particular plan. I did send a report since of the open meeting law. I only sent a copy to Charles and to Jason, but I do think we should continue that because we're, the state has pushed back on this. Because of staff shortages, they haven't put out the RFP yet. But it's got to come out pretty soon. And I'd like to have that on the work plan.
Okay. if everyone's okay, we'll add that. I think you can give an update to December 3rd. You will be presenting to move forward with the application.
Right, yeah, I've done a lot of work on that end, and I think we're in a good position to respond with a strong proposal, but we don't see what the format is yet. They haven't put out the format requirement.
So the most important thing is, whether we receive that award or not. We've discussed that. If we don't, then we'll have to adjust. So we can write something in here that says continue to work on the solar through the 3M settlement. We'll add that.
Okay, yeah, please don't leave that off.
Okay.
I fully agree.
And you can put that report in the minutes. You can attach it to the minutes if you'd like.
I think that would be good, then everybody has it.
Anything else?
No, appreciate it. So, future items and reports, our next meeting isn't until February 4th, so we should have some more information coming forward on the old fire station by that point, based on the schedule. And then we'll talk about the meeting dates at that February 4th meeting, which we have quarterly. With that, we caught back up on time.
Will the EDA see the revised RFP?
I can send it out.
Prior to the next meeting?
I can send it, yes.
That's great, thank you.
Put that in the packet, so that we get that. All right, I'm gonna adjourn tonight's meeting. Thank you for everybody for your time at 6:52. That's exciting stuff there. Get something in there.
Very, I like learning about this stuff. That was very interesting.
Yeah.
See you later.
It's a little different than some of your
It's gonna be interesting to see how different
Yeah.
the developers are, right?
I'm so committed to
I'm gonna open the
Well,
presentation.
that's why I
and see
wanted
it.
to understand who the buyer is.
Well,
And I think I
question
read
whether
we were in like a
a lot of developers who might get involved in drive through towns.